I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. You asked, and you shall receive. We're going to review The War on Drugs, Lost in the Dream. The War on Drugs. A guy by the name of Adam Grandiseel? Is that how you say it?
Hopefully.
We suck at pronouncing it?
Yeah, I know.
Anyways, this guy used to play with another singer-songwriter called Kurt Weill, whom we've reviewed a couple of his records and really liked his solo career so far. But back in the day, you know, Adam was playing with Kurt Weill and the Violators, and then I think that he went on and they started The War on Drugs together. Then Kurt Weill left to do his solo career.
Yeah, and he kind of joined him with that for a bit, but...
it's just this musical hodgepodge. They just keep switching names.
Lots of good collaboration.
Yeah, and that's
good. I enjoy that.
It just makes better music. But right now, The War on Drugs, this is their third record, and Adam is the frontman for that record. And it kind of comes off of, you know, they had a big record a couple years ago, went on tour a lot, and then, you know, Lost in the Dream, from what I've read, is, you know, Adam's struggle with how he never felt like he was totally with it when he was on tour, and kind of went through this like metamorphosis and felt like he wasn't always there. Similar things have happened to other bands like Radiohead, who have made documentaries and lots of very good songs about that. So it's an aesthetic that is, you know, not uncommon, you know, in the music industry for bands to go on tour and like have this difficult time dealing with the grueling schedule of a tour and all the shows.
Kind of an identity crisis,
you know? Absolutely, and I can assume that that's pretty moving. Now, the issue with this is that the common person doesn't really ever experience this in their life, so it can be a little hard to relate sometimes. However, I think that's where the artist really gets their to show how good they are at, you know, making their music relatable. How can they provide that sense of warmth for the listener to bring them in and have them relate? Tom, how would you describe the sound of Lost in the Dream?
I think that it can be put pretty succinctly as kind of a classic rock vibe along the lines of, you know, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, Dire Straits, Bob Dylan. Only a lot dreamier, really. A little more reverbed out, a little spacier. It takes its time to develop these tracks. This is a long
bit more
album.
Modern, definitely in that style of that 80s rock, which you know, he did that on purpose. Yeah. And another band did that a couple years ago. Arcade Fire did it with The Suburbs, and, you know, harkening back to these old sounds from Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, Dylan. This guy has a very Dylan-esque voice. Yeah. I thought that numerous times, and while he's dabbling in different styles, these songs all seem to have that cohesive sonic motif to them.
Yeah, very much so. From there, I think it's kind of more interesting. And now those influences are undeniable. I think it's more interesting to see where he's going with it, though. And not only in terms of the individual songs, but in terms of the whole album. Because a lot of the songwriters or, you know, artists we just named are really, you know, they made great albums back in their day, but they were great albums because there were a lot of good songs on them. You know, Bruce Springsteen, I'm not a huge Springsteen fan, but I respect what he's done for music, and really when I listen back to his stuff, I think of him more as a songwriter as far as individual tracks rather than an album composer or something like that.
He never made a magnum opus album that everyone loves.
Yeah,
now, I'm sure there's several people out there that may dispute that.
I just mean, like, it's more because you focus on the killer tracks that are on them. I feel like War on Drugs here take more of an approach of thinking of it as an album. I mean, they have a lot of space to kind of transition. They've got some kind of in-between tracks, like The Haunting Idol, 3 minutes of just kind of moving, kind of ambient noise. It's still kind of guitar based, but, you know, that's something that you don't hear a lot of those kind of classic musicians do. So that's where this becomes a lot more modernized and really takes its influences and goes in a different direction with them.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that I got into pretty quickly is just the general sense of the instrumentation. There's a lot of guitar on this record. A lot of Springsteen-esque guitar solos, you know, all over this thing. And I, you know, have just a certain affinity for good guitar. So that was fun for me. But then also just a lot of just the melodies they used, I found just to be really good, and they weren't overly hooky, but just like a good example is in track 2, Red Eyes. There's that synth melody in the background that really kind of it strikes the right emotional chord in the chorus, and I can't get it I can't get it out of my head. Now later on, you know, there's I'd say that there's a more electronic component to the first half of this album. I think that this album gets a bit more into the singer-songwriter on the second half with tracks like Eyes to the Wind and the title track Lost in the Dream. Those definitely remind me of, you know, you got the piano, guitar, and then the Dylan-esque vocals. I mean, much more intimate productions there that really convey, I think, the essence of what he was going for in Lost in the Dream.
Yeah, and that's where it comes back to that whole album approach and the theming. Even if it's not a concept album telling some specific narrative, it starts out a lot more up in the air and a lot more just kind of spacey, you know, start under the pressure.
Right.
Makes sense with what you were talking about with the whole experience and mood he was
drum,
going for.
Like the percussive clicks oscillating between the two speakers to begin with. That's a very cool way to open.
Exactly, it is. It creates a little bit of tension, and then that's a long track, and it establishes that. Then, you know, as it goes through, I think the album becomes more grounded, like you said. I think that's how the music kind of connects with the album theming and structure that he was going for. So I think it's really cool to see an artist do that, because not a lot of people pay attention that closely, and you can tell that he wasn't just thinking of these as individual tracks. He ordered them, arranged them, produced them, wrote them to be an album, and that's really cool to listen to. It makes the thing much more engaging, and I think it's necessary, because one thing that held me down a little bit on this album, won't do this for everyone, but I felt like there's quite a bit of empty space. You know,
these are long songs.
They are long songs, and they progress to the point of meandering a bit for my taste. Like I said, not everyone's going to think that. I think
Under the Pressure, the opening track, is a good example.
Yeah.
From track 4, An Ocean in Between the Waves,
Definitely.
that really repetitive drum beat that I don't understand where that came from in music, but people seem to like it. I don't get it, but it's used often.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, I think it would have been a mistake to make all of these be 3 to 4 minute radio-structured songs. But I think that there is a happy medium. Maybe they just went a little bit overboard. For my taste. Let me just put that out there. Disclaimer there. That's just me. But I would have maybe liked it a little bit better if it was slightly more focused. But I also think that maybe some of the meaning would have been lost.
Yeah.
And especially meaning to the artist. You know, you mentioned that what he's going for here isn't necessarily going to be relatable to the common listener. And while that will certainly be a bit of an obstacle for some people, I don't think it necessarily means that that writers, musicians should shy away from it, because I think that naturally writing music has to be a bit of a selfish process.
It has to be.
If you don't care about what you're doing, how can any listeners? If it's over their heads, then they're going to have trouble caring. But I think the place you need to start with is making yourself care and writing music you care about. And there is no question that that's the case here. So, you know, mad respect for that.
I totally agree. And I think that the difference, I know that you and I are a little bit, I think I'm a little higher than you on this one. And I think that the main difference is, I have an affinity for any album that is written to be an album listening experience, and this definitely is that. So it gets points for me there. The other thing I found is I actually didn't like this album at first. I was probably much lower than you when we started listening to this, because it's like, I've heard this before and these guys aren't doing anything with it. I had to dig at these songs. I had to listen to all the instrumentation going on in the background, how they compose these tracks, some of the production tactics. You know, there's a lot of really advanced production on this album.
Oh yeah, very much so.
A lot of, you know, just how they mix things, the effects that they put on things, whether they put delay on the guitar and how much reverb they put on the drums, and the different aspects of everything else going on. Like, it's actually pretty intricate. And so I got into that. But then what really sold it for me, you know, on top of what I said before, when you have like some emotional moments like in Red Eyes or in Eyes to the Wind and Lost in the Dream, is getting into the lyrics. These lyrics are I mean, I just think he nailed it for what he was going for in the lyrics. And without just citing specific examples, and I would just recommend people like look at the lyrics, because somehow that combination just made me appreciate what they were going for a lot more. I think that I think that I agree with you as far as like, I think some of these songs could have been shorter, particularly the two I noted earlier, and I think that this album could have been groomed a bit better to be something a bit more than what it is. However, I still think that they pulled it off nicely.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 81 on this.
I'm going to go 75.
Okay, bit of a disagreement.
Yeah.
A 6-point difference. I mean, whenever you have the leading digit
it's
is
significant,
different. It's different. I mean, you know, we're fighting it out here. We're going to get boxing gloves out when this is done. So upper 70s from us. This is, I think, 78.
Yep.
That means that this is above average for us, and we would recommend this album to you, especially if you're into this particular aesthetic. If you've listened to Lost in the Dream or are a big fan of the War on Drugs, please leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts of this record at www.velocitiesinmusic.com and youtube.com/velocitiesinmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums you'd like to see Tom and I review on this YouTube channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.